I'm going to remove the starter motor. It's secured by a bolt and nut on each end of the rear of the motor, and then there's a bracket on the front right here. So the other thing that I need to do is then detach the electrical wiring to the terminal here, and then there's another wire that connects down here. The head of the bolt that secures the starter motor at the rear is captive against the housing of the starter motor, so the bolt won't turn when you're backing the nut off. And it's a 13 millimeter socket that I used, and a standard fit on this side just fine, but it's too tight a clearance for a standard 3/8 drive 13 mil to fit. So what I used is a thin wall socket, and it's a 1/4 inch drive, and it's got a thinner wall, and I could get that in and back that nut off. Now the nuts are a locking nut, and on the left side, as you're facing the rear of the engine, you can just push the bolt straight through and it'll come out. However, on the right side, it's kind of buried back in here, and so what I'd use is a magnet, and I can catch the bolt head and then push it forward and pull it back out. I pulled the front engine cover off, and down here you can see there's a bolt that holds the bottom of the bracket that the front of the starter motor is mounted to. So I removed the bolt, and now I can rotate the starter motor up, and I have to kind of jiggle it a little to get the bracket to clear, but I've got it out now. And now I can clean up all the grunge that's in the top of the engine. Now that the motor is removed, you can see how that front bracket is used. It attaches to the starter motor up here with 2 small nuts, and then this hole here, that's where that 10 millimeter bolt I removed from the front after I pulled the front engine cover. So this was the big terminal and the nut that secured the large cable. It's the positive battery cable. And there's one other wire that went on there, and that's this wire with a little red insulation and a ring terminal, which also fits here on this large nut and bolt. Now there's a little spade terminal here, and that's where this black wire goes. All of those electrical connections are going to the starter solenoid, which is physically attached to the starter motor body itself. So I'm going to test the starter motor to see if it works, and I mounted it in the soft rubber jaws of my vise. Now this is the Bendix gear, and when it spins, it moves outward on the shaft so it can engage the teeth on the flywheel. What I've got is a battery, and I connected the red or plus terminal to the large threaded terminal on the starter solenoid with the big nut. Then I took a bolt and put it here in the mounting bracket and connected another cable and brought that over to the negative or ground terminal on the battery. And these are basically typical battery cables that I have in my spare parts bin. Now the other thing I've done is connect a wire to the spade terminal on the starter solenoid, and that's where the power comes into the starter solenoid from the starter relay to close the starter solenoid. So all I have to do is take the other end of the wire and touch it here to the plus terminal of the solenoid, and it'll power the solenoid. So what we want to do is see what happens when I do that. Okay, I have a functional starter motor. Life is good.